She said she didn't know anything about machines. But what she did to the engine changed everything. Samantha Mitchell stood before the steaming engine when she heard it for the 10th time that week, that women had no knack for mechanics. The words came from Richard, the garage manager, who crossed his arms as he watched her with suspicion. "You told me you didn't know anything about machines when I hired you as an administrative assistant," he repeated, shaking his head. "Now you want to tinker with the engine of the most important car we have here?" Samantha kept her eyes fixed on the metal parts, her hands already greasy and trembling slightly. It was true. She had lied during the interview 3 months ago, but she had her reasons no one there could guess. "I learn fast," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Can I try?" Richard let out a dry laugh. "Try?" "Samantha, this is Mrs. Eleanor Thompson's car, the most influential woman in Rochester. If you break something, this garage shuts down." The engine kept releasing steam, and Samantha could feel the heat radiating from it. She knew this problem, knew it well, but how could she explain without revealing her secret? "Give me 5 minutes," she finally said, raising her eyes to meet Richard's. "Just 5 minutes." "Not a chance." Richard stepped forward, blocking her from the engine. "Go back to the office, Samantha. Leave." This to the real mechanics. That's when Frank, the head mechanic, came running, his face red with effort and worry. "Richard, I can't figure out the problem," he panted, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "I've checked everything I could. If we don't fix this today—" I know. Richard ran a hand through his hair, visibly nervous. "Mrs. Thompson is back from her trip tomorrow morning." Samantha took advantage of the men's distraction and moved closer to the engine. Her fingers lightly touched one of the hoses, feeling the irregular vibration. It was exactly what she suspected. "It's the turbo exhaust valve," she said quietly but loud enough to be heard. Frank turned to her with disbelief. "What? How did you—" "The vibration is irregular here," Samantha continued, pointing to a specific spot. "And the steam isn't coming out evenly. The valve must be partially clogged." Richard narrowed his eyes, torn between irritation and curiosity. "You're making this up?" "Then check." Samantha took a step back, crossing her arms in a mirror of his earlier stance. "If I'm wrong, I'll quit right now." The silence that followed was tense. Frank looked at Richard, waiting for a decision. The manager, meanwhile, seemed to be wrestling with his own biases. "Frank, check the valve," he finally ordered, his voice heavy with reluctance. The head mechanic leaned over the engine, his experienced hands moving with precision. After a few minutes that felt like hours, he straightened up, his face showing genuine surprise. "She's right." Frank could barely believe his own words. "The valve is partially clogged. How did I miss that?" Samantha felt a wave of relief, but kept her expression neutral. She couldn't show too much confidence, not yet. Richard, however, didn't seem convinced. "Coincidence? You must have overheard one of the mechanics talking about it before." "I can fix it," Samantha offered, ignoring the implied accusation. "Absolutely not," Richard stomped his foot. "Frank will handle this. You go back to the office now." Samantha bit her lower lip, frustrated. She knew she could solve the problem in minutes, but how could she convince these stubborn men without revealing the whole truth? "Richard, with all due respect," Frank cut in, wiping his hands on a rag. "I've never worked on a valve like this before. It's an imported model, very specific. If she really knows—" Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to hit the like button and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, back to the story. "She doesn't know," Richard exploded. "It's impossible. 3 months ago, she didn't even know how to change a tire." Samantha felt his words like a slap. It was true she had presented herself as inexperienced, but it had been out of necessity, not incompetence. "People change," she said calmly. "People learn." "In 3 months?" Richard shook his head. "Not even the best mechanic course in the world." A new noise from the engine cut the argument short. The steam thickened, and a strong, burnt smell began to spread through the garage. "It's getting worse," Frank exclaimed, stepping back quickly. "If this keeps up, the whole engine could melt down." Panic washed over Richard's face. Thompson's garage was well known throughout the region, serving the most important families in town. A mistake like this could mean the end of everything. Samantha saw her chance and acted. Before anyone could stop her, she grabbed Frank's toolbox and positioned herself in front of the engine. "Samantha, no!" Richard shouted, but she was already working. Her hands moved with a precision that completely contradicted the image of an inexperienced administrative assistant she had cultivated. In seconds, she had pinpointed the exact issue and started working on the valve. Frank and Richard watched, frozen. The way she handled the tools, the confidence in every movement, how her eyes analyzed each component. There was no denying she knew exactly what she was doing. But how? Frank murmured, unable to finish the question. Samantha didn't answer, too focused on the task. The steam gradually lessened, and the engine's irregular noise steadied. In less than 10 minutes, she had not only identified the problem, but fixed it. When she finally stepped back, wiping her hands on a rag, the engine purred smoothly, with no trace of the earlier issue. The garage was dead silent. Even the other mechanics, drawn by the commotion, stood there gaping. "Done," Samantha said simply, handing the tools back to Frank. "Mrs. Eleanor's car is fixed." Richard opened and closed his mouth several times, clearly struggling to process what he'd just seen. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse with disbelief. "Who are you?" Samantha held his gaze for a long moment before answering. "Someone who really needed this job." "That's not an answer," Richard insisted, stepping toward her. "No one learns to do this in 3 months. You lied to me." "I said I didn't know anything about machines." Samantha chose her words carefully. "I didn't say I never had." The revelation landed like a bombshell. Frank was the first to react. "You were a mechanic before. Where? Why hide it?" Samantha looked away, suddenly interested in wiping an imaginary grease stain from her hands. How could she explain without revealing too much? How could she tell her story without stirring more suspicion? "It's complicated," she murmured. "Complicated?" Richard was red with anger. "You made a fool out of me. Came in here, pretending to be something you're not." "I never pretended to be incompetent at my job," Samantha defended herself. "I did everything asked of me in the office, never gave anyone a reason to complain." "But you lied." Richard slammed his fist on the nearest workbench. "How can I trust someone who lies?" "Would you have trusted me if I'd told the truth?" Samantha shot back, finally finding the courage to face him. "Tell me, Richard, would you have hired me if you knew I understood mechanics?" The question caught the manager off guard. He hesitated, and in that moment of silence, Samantha saw confirmation of her worst fears. "That's what I thought," she said bitterly. "You would never have given me a chance." "That's not true," Richard protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" Samantha laughed humorlessly. "How many female mechanics do you have working here? How many women in the technical department?" The silence that followed was answer enough. In the entire history of Thompson's garage, there had never been a woman working directly with the cars. Frank cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. "Look, whatever her story is, the fact is she saved our skin today. Mrs. Eleanor would have finished us if we hadn't gotten the car ready." Richard ran a hand over his face, visibly tired. The adrenaline of the moment was fading, leaving behind a mix of confusion and frustration. "Let's go to my office," he ordered, pointing at Samantha. "Now, you owe me a lot of explanations." Samantha hesitated. Revealing her story meant becoming vulnerable, exposing wounds that hadn't fully healed. But looking around, seeing the curiosity and budding respect in the mechanic's eyes, she realized she had no choice. "All right," she agreed, following Richard down the hallway to the administrative area. The manager's office was small but organized, with photos of classic cars decorating the walls. Richard sat behind his desk, interlacing his fingers as he waited for Samantha to settle into the chair across from him. "Talk," he said simply. Samantha took a deep breath, searching for the right words. Where to begin? How to explain years of history in just a few minutes? "My father had a garage," she started, her voice quiet. "In St. Charles. It wasn't as big as this one, but it was ours. Richard leaned slightly forward, his interest piqued. I grew up around engines and tools, Samantha continued, a melancholy smile appearing on her lips. While other girls played with dolls, I was learning the difference between a Phillips screwdriver and a flathead. Your father taught you? Samantha nodded. He didn't have any sons, just me and my younger sister, Carly. But Carly was never interested in the garage, so it fell to me. And you liked it? I loved it, she answered without hesitation. It was more than liking, it was like I was born for it. By 15, I could take apart and rebuild an entire engine on my own. Richard couldn't hide his surprise. 15. My father was an excellent teacher, Samantha explained, and I was a dedicated student, very dedicated. So what happened? Richard asked, genuinely curious now. Why aren't you working at your father's garage? Samantha's expression closed off, and she looked away toward the window. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in orange hues. My father passed away, she finally said, the words coming out with difficulty. 2 years ago. I'm sorry, Richard murmured, and he seemed sincere. It was sudden, Samantha continued, struggling to keep her voice steady. A heart problem. He was working on an engine when it happened. The silence stretched for several seconds. Richard seemed to process the information, connecting the dots. And the garage? Samantha laughed bitterly. Do you think customers would keep bringing their cars to be fixed by a woman? As soon as my father was gone, they started disappearing, one by one. But if you were competent, competence doesn't matter when prejudice speaks louder, Samantha interrupted. I tried to keep the business going for 6 months. Worked. 16-hour days, offered special prices, guaranteed my work. Nothing helped. Richard leaned back in his chair, clearly disturbed by the story. And your mother? Your sister? My mother died when I was a child, Samantha explained. And Carly, well, she thought I was being stubborn, said I should accept that wasn't a place for a woman and look for something else. That's what you did. Samantha nodded slowly. After losing the garage, I lost everything. The house was rented, I couldn't keep it. I came to Rochester because I had a cousin here who said she could help me. And you decided to hide your experience. What else could I do? Samantha raised her hands in a helpless gesture. I'd already tried being honest in St. Charles, and look where that got me. I thought if I came in through a different door, maybe what? Samantha bit her lower lip, searching for the words. Maybe I could prove my worth first, before prejudice had a chance to speak. Richard fell silent for a long moment, processing everything he'd heard. Samantha could practically see the conflicting thoughts running through his mind. You've put me in a tough spot, he said finally. A really tough spot. I know, Samantha admitted, and I'm sorry for that. But I needed the job, Richard. I really did. You could have looked for work in another field. Why insist on working in a garage? Samantha met his eyes, and for the first time since she'd begun telling her story, there was fire in her gaze. Because it's what I know how to do. It's what I love to do. Why should I give it up just because I was born a woman? The question hung in the air between them. Richard seemed to wrestle with himself, his lifelong prejudices battling against the undeniable proof of Samantha's skill. The other mechanics won't accept this easily, he warned. I know. Frank might be understanding, but there's Chuck, Jake, Pete. They're old school. They won't like having a woman working with them. I can handle it, Samantha insisted. I've handled worse. Richard rubbed his temples, clearly developing a headache. And the customers. What do I say when they ask? Why, I've got a woman mechanic. Tell them the truth, Samantha suggested, that you've got the best mechanic in town. Despite everything, Richard couldn't help a small smile. Cocky, aren't you? Confident, Samantha corrected. There's a difference. The manager stood and walked to the window, watching the activity slowing down in the garage yard. The workday was winding down, but he knew the decision he made now would change everything. You know, he said without turning, my grandfather founded this garage 60 years ago. It's always been a family business, passed down from father to son. Samantha stayed quiet, sensing he needed to speak. We've always done things a certain way, Richard continued, always had unwritten rules about how things should be. Rules can change, Samantha said softly. Richard turned to face her. You really think it's that simple? I don't think it's simple at all, Samantha answered honestly, but I think it's necessary. Another long silence stretched between them. Samantha could feel her future hanging in the balance, every second of indecision torture. Finally, Richard sat back down. Here's what we'll do. You work on Mrs. Eleanor Thompson's car tomorrow, full inspection. If she's satisfied, if there are no complaints. Yes? Samantha leaned forward, hopeful. Then we'll talk. About officially changing your position, Richard finished. But there are conditions. What? First, you're on probation for a month. Any problems, any complaints, you go back to admin. Samantha nodded quickly. Agreed. Second, you'll have to earn the other mechanics' respect on your own. I won't force anyone to accept you. Fair. And third, Richard looked at her seriously, never hide anything from me again. Anything, understood? Understood, Samantha agreed, feeling an enormous weight lift from her shoulders. Richard extended his hand and she shook it firmly. Then it's settled. Tomorrow you show us what you're made of. Samantha left the office feeling lighter than she had in months, but her joy was short-lived. In the hallway she found Chuck, Jake, and Pete waiting for her, their faces set in unfriendly expressions. So it's true. Chuck, the oldest of the three, asked bluntly. You're a mechanic. I am, Samantha replied, keeping her head high. And you lied to get in here? Jake added, crossing his muscular arms. I omitted, Samantha corrected. There's a difference. Pete spat on the floor, a clear gesture of contempt. Women don't belong messing with engines. It's dangerous, it's dirty, it's a man's job. Funny, Samantha shot back. The engine didn't ask my gender before letting me fix it. Chuck took a step forward, and Samantha instinctively retreated. He was big, intimidating, with hands that looked capable of crushing a person effortlessly. Listen here, little lady. I don't know what game you're playing, but it won't work. By tomorrow, you'll see there's no place for you here. We'll see, Samantha said simply, walking past them toward the exit. But Pete grabbed her arm, squeezing with unnecessary force. You don't get it, we don't want you here. Samantha looked at his hand on her arm, then at his face. Let me go. Or what? Pete taunted, squeezing harder. Pete! Frank's voice echoed down the hallway. Let her go, now! Reluctantly, Pete obeyed, but not without one last painful squeeze. Samantha rubbed her arm, knowing it would bruise. You three go home, Frank ordered. Now. But Frank... Chuck began to protest. Now, Frank repeated with authority. And tomorrow, I expect everyone here to act like professionals. Understood? The three muttered something unintelligible and walked away, not without throwing threatening glances at Samantha. When they were alone, Frank turned to her. Are you okay? I'm fine, Samantha lied. Her arm throbbed, and she could feel tears threatening to fall. They'll make your life difficult, Frank warned. Very difficult. I know. Why do this? He asked, genuinely curious. Why not find a smaller garage where you could start fresh without lies? Samantha considered the question for a moment. Because I'm tired of starting over. Tired of running. If I'm going to fight, it'll be in a garage that's worth it. Frank nodded slowly. Can I give you some advice? Of course. Don't try to prove anything to them tomorrow. Just do your job. Do it well, do it calmly, and let the quality speak for itself. Thank you, Samantha said sincerely, for everything. For giving me the chance to show what I can do. Frank shrugged. I recognize skill when I see it. And you've got talent, Samantha. Real talent. They said their goodbyes, and Samantha walked to her old car, a Beetle 78 she kept running, herself. As she sat behind the wheel, she finally let a few tears escape. It had been an emotional roller coaster of a day, the forced revelation, the confrontation with Richard, the hostility from the other mechanics. It was a lot to process, but there was also hope. For the first time in 2 years, she had the chance to do what she loved again. It wouldn't be easy, that much was clear. But when were the important things in life ever easy? She started the Beetle's engine, smiling at the familiar purr. Tomorrow would be a new day, a fresh start. and this time she wouldn't have to hide who she really was. The drive home was short, just 15 minutes through town. Samantha lived in a small apartment downtown, splitting expenses with her cousin Lucy. When she walked in, she found Lucy in the kitchen preparing dinner. The comforting aroma of beans and rice filled the cozy room. "You're late today," Lucy remarked without turning around. "Did something happen?" Samantha dropped her purse on the couch and flopped down beside her, suddenly and utterly exhausted. "You could say that?" Lucy finally turned, noticing the tired expression on her cousin's face. "What's wrong? Trouble at work?" "They found out," Samantha said simply. No further explanation was needed. Lucy knew the whole story. She'd been the only person Samantha had trusted completely since arriving in Rochester. "Oh my God," Lucy gasped, dropping the wooden spoon and sitting next to her cousin. "How?" Samantha recounted everything, from the issue with Mrs. Eleanor Thompson's car to the confrontation with the mechanics. Lucy listened silently, her face shifting through a range of expressions as the story unfolded. "So tomorrow, you're going to work as a mechanic?" she asked when Samantha finished. "If all goes well, yes." Lucy took her cousin's hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "It'll work out. You're the best mechanic I know." "You don't know any other mechanics," Samantha pointed out with a small smile. "Details," Lucy dismissed with a wave. "The important thing is you'll finally get to be yourself." Samantha sighed. Will it really be that simple? You saw how those men reacted, and they're just the first. There are the customers, the suppliers, everyone who will question my ability. "So what?" Lucy stood up, returning to the stove. "You've been through this before and survived. You'll survive again." "Last time I lost everything," Samantha recalled bitterly. "Not everything," Lucy corrected. "You didn't lose your talent, your knowledge, or your passion, and now you've got a fresh chance." Samantha considered her cousin's words as she watched her finish preparing dinner. Maybe Lucy was right. Maybe this was the opportunity she'd been waiting for. But a part of her, a part that had been hurt too much over the years, couldn't shake the fear. What if it happened again? What if, even after proving her skills, she was rejected just for being a woman? "Stop overthinking it," Lucy scolded, as if reading her mind. "Come eat. You'll need your energy tomorrow." They dined while chatting about lighter topics, deliberately avoiding the subject of the garage. But Samantha barely touched her food, her stomach too tight with anxiety. That night she barely slept. She tossed and turned, imagining every possible scenario for the next day. In some, she triumphed, earning everyone's respect. In others, she was humiliated and kicked out of the shop. When the alarm went off at 6 in the morning, Samantha had already been awake for hours. She took a long shower, trying to calm her nerves, and carefully picked out her outfit. Normally, for administrative work, she wore dress pants and a blouse, but today would be different. Today, she'd wear a mechanic's uniform for the first time in 2 years. Her hands trembled slightly as she buttoned up the blue jumpsuit. It was one she'd kept from her father's shop, washed and pressed, waiting for the day she could wear it again. She looked in the mirror and saw not the insecure administrative assistant she'd pretended to be, but the mechanic she'd always been. It was terrifying and liberating all at once. "You've got this," she told her reflection. "Dad would be proud." The mention of her father brought tears to her eyes, but she held them back. Today wasn't a day for crying. It was a day to honor everything he'd taught her. Lucy was already awake when Samantha stepped out of the bedroom. She whistled at the sight of her cousin. "Look at you, a real mechanic." "Don't exaggerate," Samantha said, though she couldn't suppress a small smile. "I made strong coffee," Lucy gestured to the table. "And cheese bread, your favorites." Samantha felt a wave of gratitude for her cousin. During all those difficult months, Lucy had been her safe harbor, her only real family. "Thank you," she said simply, but her tone carried far more than just gratitude for breakfast. "Everything will work out," Lucy repeated. "Trust me." Samantha sipped her coffee, trying to believe her cousin's words. In 40 minutes, she'd be at the garage facing her fate. She'd either be accepted or rejected, but at least she'd be herself. The drive to the garage felt shorter than usual. Before she knew it, Samantha was parking her Beetle 78 in the lot, watching as the day's activity was already beginning. A few mechanics who were arriving stopped to watch as she stepped out of the car. The blue jumpsuit left no doubt about her intentions. Samantha held her head high as she walked toward the entrance. She could feel the stares, hear the whispers, but she didn't slow her pace. Frank was already there, reviewing the day's work orders. He looked up when she approached and smiled. "Good morning, Samantha. Ready for the big day?" "Ready," she replied with more confidence than she felt. "Mrs. Eleanor Thompson's car is in Bay 3, he informed her. Richard left the work order. Complete. Full inspection as agreed. Samantha took the clipboard and scanned the list. It was extensive, covering nearly every system in the vehicle. It would take all day. "Any problems?" Frank asked, noticing her expression. "No," Samantha shook her head. "It's just a lot. You've got this. I'm sure of it." Before Samantha could respond, Chuck appeared, already dressed in his grease-stained jumpsuit. He looked from her to Frank, his face a mask of disapproval. "Frank, I need the keys to the supply room," he said, completely ignoring Samantha. "They're in the office?" Frank replied. "Samantha, the specialty tool set is—" "She won't need the specialty tools," Chuck interrupted. "Those are for real." "Mechanics?" Frank narrowed his eyes. "Chuck, we talked about this yesterday." "We talked about nothing," Chuck shot back. "You told us to leave. Doesn't mean we agreed to this nonsense." Samantha felt anger rising, but she forced herself to stay calm. She couldn't afford to lose her temper on the first day. "The tools belong to the garage," she said evenly, "and I'm an employee here." Chuck finally looked at her, his eyes full of disdain. "For now." "Chuck, enough." Frank raised his voice. "One more word and you're suspended. Understood?" Chuck muttered something unintelligible and walked away, but not before bumping his shoulder into Samantha as he passed. The message was clear. War had been declared. "Don't mind him," Frank advised. "Come on, I'll show you where everything is." They walked to Bay 3, where Mrs. Eleanor Thompson's imposing Mercedes waited. It was a new model, packed with all the latest technology that made the job even more complex. "The specialty tools are in that cabinet over there," Frank pointed. "The diagnostic machine is on the back bench. If you need anything, just call." "Me?" "Thank you, Frank," Samantha said sincerely, "for everything." "No need to thank me," he replied. "Just show these stubborn heads what you're made of." Samantha nodded and turned to the car. She took a deep breath, inhaling the familiar scent of oil and metal that she loved so much. It was time to work. She started with a visual inspection, walking around the vehicle, noting every detail. Years of experience had taught her that many problems could be spotted just by looking carefully. She popped the hood and leaned over the engine, the same one she'd fixed the day before. Everything seemed in order, but she'd do a full check anyway. She was so focused that she didn't notice Jake approaching until she heard his voice. "Gonna wreck the old lady's car." Samantha straightened up, finding the mechanic standing too close behind her for comfort. "I'm working," she said simply. "If you don't have anything constructive to say, please leave me alone." "Constructive?" Jake laughed humorlessly. "All right, want something constructive? You shouldn't be here. A woman's place is at home taking care of kids, not getting her hands dirty with grease." "Interesting," Samantha replied, turning back to the engine. "My father had a different opinion." "Your father was what? Another softy who didn't know how to raise a daughter right?" Samantha felt as if she'd been punched in the gut. The Hia. Disrespectful mention of her father was too much. She turned sharply, her face red with anger. "Don't talk about my father," her voice came out low and dangerous. "Ever." Jake seemed surprised by the intensity of her reaction, but quickly recovered. Hit a nerve too bad. Samantha clenched her fists, fighting the urge to do something she'd regret. She couldn't afford to get violent, not when she was already at a disadvantage. "Jake, Mr. Rivers is looking for you," Richard's voice came out of nowhere. "Problem with his truck." Jake shot Samantha one last scornful look before walking away. Richard stayed, watching her with an unreadable expression. "You okay?" "I'm fine," Samantha lied, still trembling with anger. "They're going to test you," Richard said. "They'll try to make you lose your cool, make you quit. I know. The question is, can you handle it?" Samantha met his eyes. I can. I've handled worse. Richard nodded slowly. I hope so. For your sake and mine. He walked off, leaving Samantha alone with the car again. She took several deep breaths, trying to calm the storm of emotions. She couldn't let them get to her. She couldn't give those prejudiced men the satisfaction. She had to be better than them, more professional, more competent. She returned to work with renewed determination. She hooked up the diagnostic machine and began running electronic tests while checking the fluids. The oil was at the right level, but she noticed it was darker than ideal. She jotted it down on the clipboard. Change oil and filter. The brake fluid also needed replacing, as did the coolant. She was so absorbed in her work that she lost track of time. She only realized it was past noon when her stomach growled loudly. Lunchtime. Frank appeared beside her. How's it going? Samantha showed him the clipboard now filled with notes. Found more issues than I expected. The car's new, but it looks like it hasn't had regular maintenance. Frank examined the notes, nodding. Mrs. Thompson travels a lot. Sometimes she forgets these things. Good job spotting all this. I haven't even started on the undercarriage. Yet, Samantha said. I'll need the lift after lunch. No problem. Chuck's using it now, but he should be done in an hour. The mention of Chuck brought back the tension. Samantha knew she'd have to interact with him to use the lift, and she doubted it would be pleasant. Come have lunch, Frank invited. Most of the crew goes to the diner around the corner. Samantha hesitated. The idea of eating with the other mechanics wasn't appealing, but she also didn't want to isolate herself completely. All right, she finally agreed. The diner was simple, the kind that served hearty home-cooked meals. The garage crew occupied a large table in the back, and the conversations died down when Samantha walked in with Frank. Guys, make some room, Frank requested, pulling out a chair for Samantha. Reluctantly, some of the mechanics adjusted, but the mood was clearly tense. Samantha sat down, trying to ignore the hostile stares. Samantha's doing Mrs. Thompson's car inspection, Frank tried to break the ice. She's already found a bunch of maintenance issues. Big deal, Pete muttered. Anyone can see it needs an oil change. That's true, Samantha agreed calmly. But how many would notice the play in the steering linkage, or the uneven wear on the left rear brake disc? That caught the attention of a few mechanics. These were subtler issues requiring experience to spot. Did you check that without lifting the car? A younger mechanic Samantha didn't know asked with genuine curiosity. The noise when turning pointed to the steering issue, Samantha explained. And the slight pull when braking suggested uneven wear. But I'll confirm once the car's on the lift. Luck, Chuck said dismissively. Pure luck. Samantha shrugged. We'll see when I take it apart. If I'm wrong, I'll admit it right away. When you're wrong, Chuck corrected. Not if. Lunch continued in that tense atmosphere. Samantha ate quietly, listening to the others talk about cars and mechanical problems. A few times, she had to hold back from joining in, especially when she heard clearly wrong suggestions. When they returned to the garage, Chuck was still using the lift, working on a pickup truck. Samantha waited patiently, using the time to continue other parts of the inspection. She checked the electrical system, tested all the lights, inspected the battery. Every component was scrutinized, every detail noted. How much longer will you be? She finally asked Chuck when the clock struck 3. As long as it takes, he replied without looking at her. Real work takes time. Samantha took a deep breath, counting to 10 in her head. I need the lift to finish the inspection. The car has to be ready today. Then wait, Chuck said simply. It was Pete who suggested with a sly smile, or use the hydraulic jack. That's what we used to do. Using just the hydraulic jack to inspect the entire underside would be extremely difficult and time-consuming, not to mention less safe. It was clearly a taunt. Good idea. Samantha surprised everyone by agreeing. Where is it? Pete blinked, not expecting that response. Over in the corner. Samantha went to fetch the jack without hesitation. If they wanted to make her life harder, she'd show them it wouldn't stop her from doing her job. She positioned the jack, raised the car as much as possible, and lay on the cold garage floor. Not ideal, but it would work. As she suspected, the steering linkage had play. She marked it with chalk to show later. The brake disc also had the wear she'd predicted. She was checking the exhaust system when she felt something drip on her face. Oil. She looked up and saw a small puddle forming above her. What the? She rolled aside quickly, avoiding a drenching. She crawled out from under the car and looked around. Chuck was nearby, fiddling with something in the pickup's engine on the lift. Too much of a coincidence. "Sorry," Chuck called out, not sounding the least bit remorseful. Spilled a little oil. Accidents happen. Samantha wiped her face with a rag, struggling to keep her composure. He'd done it on purpose, she was sure of it. "No problem," she replied with forced calm. "Like you said, accidents happen." She went back under the car, more alert now. There were no more accidents, but she could feel the other mechanics watching, waiting for her reaction. She finished the underside inspection and noted everything. By the time Chuck finally freed up the lift, it was nearly 5. She'd have to rush to finish. She worked with double efficiency, changing fluids, adjusting what was needed, replacing worn parts. Her hands moved with the confidence of years of experience. "Impressive," she heard someone murmur. It was the young mechanic from lunch, watching as she bled the brake system perfectly. "Thanks," Samantha replied without stopping. "I'm Matthew," he introduced himself. "Started here 6 months ago." "Samantha," she answered, though he obviously already knew. "Where did you learn?" Matthew asked with genuine curiosity. "It's just, you're really good." Samantha hesitated for a moment before answering. "My father taught me. He must have been an excellent teacher." "He was," Samantha agreed, feeling the familiar tightness in her chest. Matthew seemed to notice the past tense and didn't press further. Instead, he offered, "Need help with anything?" Samantha was surprised by the offer. It was the first real show of support besides Frank. "Can you hold the flashlight here?" she asked, pointing to a hard-to-see area. They worked in companionable silence for the next few minutes. Samantha noticed some of the other mechanics watching, especially the younger ones. At 6:30, she called it a day. The car was flawless, every system checked and adjusted. She did the final test, starting the engine and listening carefully. The smooth, steady purr was music to her ears. Perfect. "I'm done," she announced to Frank, handing him the clipboard with the full report. Frank scanned the notes, his eyes widening as he read. "You did all this today?" "It's what was on the work order," Samantha replied simply. "Samantha, we usually split a job. Like this over 2 days," Frank explained. "You did it in 1, and you even spotted issues that weren't on the original list." Richard appeared, clearly having overheard the conversation. "Let me see that." He took the clipboard and read carefully, his face cycling through several expressions. "Let's test it," he said finally. "Chuck, come here." Chuck approached reluctantly. "Check her work," Richard ordered. "I want to know if everything's correct." Samantha felt the unfairness of the situation. She doubted Chuck's work got this kind of scrutiny, but she stayed quiet. She knew she had to prove her worth beyond any doubt. Chuck spent the next 20 minutes examining every aspect of Samantha's work. She could see him desperately searching for some mistake, anything he could use against her. Finally, he had to admit, It's all correct." "Everything?" Richard pressed. Chuck gritted his teeth. "Yes, everything." "And the extra issues she identified?" Chuck checked the steering terminal and brake disc. His face turned red as he confirmed she was right. They did need repair. A murmur spread through the group of mechanics that had gathered to watch. Samantha kept her expression neutral, but inside she felt immense satisfaction. "Good job," Richard said, and he sounded sincere. "Really good job." "Thank you," Samantha replied simply. "Mrs. Eleanor is picking up the car early tomorrow," Richard continued. "We'll see what she thinks." The group gradually dispersed. Some mechanics walked away murmuring to each other. Others cast appraising glances at Samantha. Matthew gave her a subtle thumbs up before leaving. Chuck, Jake, and Pete were the last to go, clearly unhappy with her success. "This isn't over," Chuck muttered as he passed her. Samantha didn't respond. She knew it was true. One successful day wouldn't change deep-rooted prejudices, but it was a start. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now continuing. When she finally got home, Samantha was exhausted both physically and emotionally. Lucy was waiting with dinner ready and an anxious smile. "Tell me everything," she demanded as soon as Samantha walked in. Between bites, Samantha recounted the day, the teasing, the challenges, the small victories. Lucy listened intently, her face shifting from outrage to pride as the story unfolded. "You showed them," Lucy said when Samantha finished. "I knew you could do it." "It was just the first day," Samantha reminded herself. "And tomorrow Mrs. Eleanor will evaluate the work. If she doesn't like it—" "She'll love it," Lucy interrupted. "Stop worrying about what hasn't even happened yet." Samantha tried to follow her cousin's advice, but spent another restless night. Mrs. Eleanor's opinion would be crucial. A client that important could make or break her chance at the garage. The next morning she arrived early, wanting to check the car one last time before the owner arrived. Everything was perfect, but she polished a few spots anyway. At exactly 8, a private driver pulled up to the garage entrance. Mrs. Eleanor stepped out, an elegant woman in her mid-60s, impeccably dressed. Richard went to greet her personally, all smiles and courtesy. "Mrs. Eleanor, your car is ready. We've completed the full inspection as requested." "Good," the woman replied firmly. "I want to see the report." Richard handed her the clipboard, and Samantha watched from a distance as Mrs. Eleanor read carefully, her eyebrows raised several times. "Who did this work?" she asked. Richard hesitated visibly. "It was our new mechanic." "Mechanic?" Mrs. Eleanor repeated, surprised. "A woman?" "Yes, ma'am." "Samantha, could you come here?" Samantha approached, trying not to show her nerves. Mrs. Eleanor looked her up and down with sharp eyes. "You did this entire inspection?" the woman asked directly. "Yes, ma'am." "By yourself?" "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Eleanor examined the report again. "You identified issues the previous mechanics never mentioned." Samantha wasn't sure if that was good or bad. "I thought it was important to mention everything I found, ma'am." "And you fixed it all?" "Everything within my ability. Some parts weren't in stock, but I noted them for future maintenance." Mrs. Eleanor walked to her car, opened the door and started the engine. She listened for a moment, then turned it off and faced the group. "Remarkable," she said. "In 2 years with this car, this is the first time the engine has sounded this smooth." Relief washed over Samantha. "Richard," Mrs. Eleanor continued, "I want her to handle my car from now on, exclusively." The silence that followed was deafening. Samantha could feel the disbelieving stares of the other mechanics. "Oh, of course, Mrs. Eleanor," Richard stammered. "Whatever you wish. And I want her to take care of my friends' cars too," the woman added. "I'll recommend her. Finally, someone who does thorough, honest work." She stepped closer to Samantha and, to everyone's surprise, shook her hand. "Congratulations. Young lady, it's rare to find such competence these days." "Thank you, ma'am," Samantha managed to say, still processing what had happened. Mrs. Eleanor drove off, leaving behind a group of stunned men and a woman who had just taken a big step toward her dreams. But Samantha knew the battle was far from over. Mrs. Eleanor's support was important, but it would also breed more resentment among her co-workers. As if confirming her thoughts, Chuck approached as soon as Richard returned to the office. "You think you've won something?" he hissed. "A rich old lady liked your work. Big deal." "It's a start," Samantha replied calmly. "You don't get it," Jake joined in. "We don't want you here, and we'll make your life so hard, you'll beg to leave." "You can try." Samantha kept her voice steady, though inside she was shaking. Pete completed the trio. "Accidents happen in garages, dangerous things. A fragile little thing like you could get hurt." "Is that a threat?" Samantha asked directly. "It's a warning," Chuck answered. "A friendly warning." They walked away, leaving Samantha with a racing heart. The veiled threats were unsettling, but she couldn't show fear. "Don't pay them any mind," Matthew appeared beside her. "They're dinosaurs. The world is changing and they can't accept it." "Dinosaurs can still bite," Samantha observed. "But they're going extinct," Matthew smiled. "Look, more people here support you than you think. They're just afraid to speak up." Afraid of what? Chuck's worked here 20 years, Jake 15, Pete 12. They have influence, they intimidate the newer ones, but that doesn't mean everyone agrees with them. It was an interesting revelation. Samantha had assumed she was completely alone, but maybe she had silent allies. "Thanks for telling me," she said sincerely. "Just be careful," Matthew warned. They weren't joking about making your life hard. The warning proved true in the days that followed. Samantha found her tools mysteriously missing, having to search the entire garage. Parts she set aside for a job disappeared. Work orders were accidentally altered, but she persevered. She arrived early to organize everything, stayed late to ensure nothing was left unfinished, and, most importantly, her work remained impeccable. Mrs. Eleanor Thompson's recommendation brought in new clients, high society women who preferred to trust their cars to another woman. Within 2 weeks, Samantha's schedule was packed. This, of course, only fueled the resentment. One particularly tense afternoon, she was working on a BMW's engine when she heard a crack and felt the hydraulic jack give way. She rolled out quickly, her heart racing. The car dropped a few inches before the safety system locked, but it could have been much worse. "How strange," Pete remarked, passing by. "That jack was working perfectly yesterday." Samantha inspected the equipment and found clear signs of sabotage. Someone had deliberately loosened a valve. She stood up, staring directly at Pete. "That could have killed me." "Could have," he agreed with a cold smile. "That's why I always say a garage is no place for a woman." Anger boiled inside her, but Samantha forced herself to think strategically. She had no proof, and making accusations would only paint her as problematic. Instead, she went straight to Frank. "I need to talk to you in private." They went to a secluded area, and Samantha recounted the incident. Frank listened, his expression growing graver. "Are you sure it was sabotage?" Samantha showed him the loosened valve. "This doesn't happen on its own." Frank rubbed his face, clearly disturbed. "Samantha, this is serious. Really serious." "I know. I'll talk to Richard. This has gone too far." "No," she stopped him. "Not yet, let me handle it." "Samantha, they could have seriously hurt you." "I know," she repeated. "But if I run to the boss every time something happens, I'll just confirm everything they think about women being weak." Frank didn't seem convinced. "So, what are you going to do?" "I'll take my precautions," Samantha said simply. "And I'll keep doing my job." From that day on, she checked every piece of equipment before using it. It was extra time, extra work, but necessary for her safety. A week later, she arrived in the morning to find her tool locker vandalized. Her personal tools, the ones she'd inherited from her father, were scattered on the floor, some clearly damaged. That was the last straw. Samantha gathered each tool carefully, fighting back tears. Those tools were more than work instruments. They were memories, heirlooms, a connection to her father. Matthew found her there, kneeling among the tools. "My God, Samantha, who did this?" "You know who," she replied hoarsely. "This has gone too far," Matthew was furious. "Now you have to report it." "Report what?" Samantha stood up, holding a bent wrench. "There are no cameras here, no proof, but everyone knows." "Knowing isn't proving," Samantha interrupted him. "And even if it were proved, what would happen? Would they get a warning, suspended for a few days? Then they'd come back even more vengeful." Matthew had no answer for that. They both knew she was right. Samantha spent the morning fixing what she could of the tools and improvising with the rest. She wouldn't let them see her defeated. It was Lucy who suggested a change in strategy that night after hearing about the latest incident. "You're trying to win a defensive war," she observed. "Maybe it's time to attack." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. They attack you because they feel threatened. You're better than them, and they know it. So, instead of just surviving, the attacks. I show them just how much better I am," Samantha finished, understanding. Exactly. The opportunity came the next day. A customer brought in an Audi with a complex electrical system issue none of the mechanics could solve. The car had been sitting for 3 days, and the customer was growing impatient. Samantha overheard Chuck telling Richard they'd have to send the car to the dealership, which would be expensive and time-consuming. "Can I take a look?" she offered. Chuck laughed mockingly. "Even with 20 years of experience, I couldn't figure it out. What makes you think you can?" "Maybe a fresh pair of eyes will help," Samantha suggested calmly. Richard, already desperate, agreed. "You've got an hour. If you can't fix it, it goes to the dealership." Samantha approached the car with apparent calm, but inside, her mind was racing. She knew that model. She'd worked on a similar one at her father's garage. She connected the diagnostic machine and analyzed the error codes. Then she did something the others hadn't tried. She ignored the codes and manually checked every connection. In 20 minutes, she found the problem. A corroded connector was causing intermittent signals that confused the entire system. "Found it?" she announced. Chuck approached skeptically. "Impossible." Samantha showed him the damaged connector. "The corrosion is almost invisible, but it's enough to cause the issue. The diagnostic system didn't catch it because the problem is physical, not electronic." She cleaned the connector, applied protective spray, and reconnected it. The car started immediately, all systems working perfectly. The garage fell silent. How did you know where to look?" Jake asked, genuinely baffled. "Experience," Samantha replied simply. "Saw a similar case a few years back." Richard was visibly impressed. "You just saved the customer time and money. Good work." But it was Chuck's reaction that surprised her most. He stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. It wasn't acceptance, far from it, but maybe the beginning of reluctant respect. The attacks lessened after that, though they didn't stop completely. Samantha still found small sabotages, nasty comments, attempts to humiliate her. But something fundamental had changed. Other mechanics began discreetly seeking her out when they had questions. They wouldn't admit it publicly, but they acknowledged her skill. One afternoon, even Frank came to her with a tricky problem. "Samantha, there's a Golf here with a noise I can't pin down. Can you take a look?" She inspected the car, drove it for a few minutes, and identified the issue. A loose part in the exhaust system that only vibrated at a certain RPM. "How do you do that?" Frank asked, amazed. "It's like you hear things the rest of us can't." "My dad used to say every car has its own voice," Samantha explained. "You just have to learn to listen." A month had passed since the day her identity was revealed. Samantha had built a respectable client base, mostly women who felt more comfortable with her. But the real test came when Mr. Augustus, one of the garage's oldest and most conservative customers, brought in his classic Mercedes for maintenance. "I want Chuck," he told Richard as soon as he arrived. "Like always." "Chuck's busy with another job," Richard explained, "but we have other excellent mechanics available." "Who?" Richard hesitated before suggesting. "Samantha is very skilled, with Mercedes." "A woman?" Mr. Augustus interrupted. "No way, I'll wait for Chuck." Samantha, who was nearby, felt the familiar sting of rejection. But this time something unexpected happened. Mr. Augustus, Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, appeared in the garage. "What a coincidence running into you here." "Eleanor," the man greeted, "here to pick up your car." "I brought it in for another checkup." "With Samantha," Mrs. Thompson replied. "Third time this month. I've never seen my car running so well." "Samantha?" Mr. Augustus repeated. "The same one Richard just suggested." "The very one. My dear, all my friends trust only her with their cars now. Competence has no gender, Augustus." The man seemed to consider her words. Samantha watched, the scene grateful for the unexpected support. "Well, if you say so, Eleanor. I do, and I stand by it," Mrs. Thompson said firmly. "Give her a chance, I guarantee you won't regret it." Reluctantly, Mr. Augustus agreed. Samantha stepped forward professionally, took the keys, and got to work. The classic Mercedes was a beauty, and she treated it with the respect it deserved. She identified not just the current issues, but potential future problems, documenting everything meticulously. When Mr. Augustus returned and saw the detailed report, he was impressed. Even more so when he started the car and heard the engine purring like it hadn't in years. "I have to admit," he told Richard, "she knows what she's doing." The news spread. If even conservative Mr. Augustus had approved of Samantha's work, maybe things were really changing. But Frank, Jake, and Pete weren't ready to accept defeat. If they couldn't push her out with direct sabotage, they'd try another method. Samantha began noticing her work orders were being altered. Impossible deadlines were set. Complex jobs were assigned simultaneously, creating situations where failure was almost inevitable. One particularly chaotic Friday, she had 5 cars to finish by the end of the day. Normally it would be a 2-person job, but mysteriously, everyone else was too busy to help. Samantha rolled up her sleeves and dove in. She organized tasks by priority, optimized every move, and worked non-stop. Matthew tried to help discreetly, but was scolded by Frank. "You've got your own work, rookie. Let her handle it." The hours passed, and Samantha raced against time. Her muscles ached. Exhaustion weighed on her, but she couldn't stop. By 6 in the evening, with the garage emptying out, she still had 2 cars left. The clients would arrive in an hour. Then, something unexpected happened. Frank showed up, already out of uniform, clearly ready to leave. "Need help?" he offered. Samantha looked at him, surprised. "You don't have to." "I know I don't," Frank cut in. "But what they're doing to you isn't right. Let me help." Together they worked frantically. Frank took one car while Samantha finished the other. With minutes to spare, both vehicles were ready. When the clients arrived and left satisfied, Samantha allowed herself a moment of exhaustion, sitting on a toolbox. "Thank you," she told Frank. "You saved my skin." "You would have managed alone," Frank replied. "You always do, but you shouldn't have to." That's the price," Samantha said philosophically. "The price of being the first." "It shouldn't be," Frank insisted. "I'll talk to Richard about those work orders. This is harassment, plain and simple." Samantha didn't try to stop him this time. She was too tired to keep fighting alone. The next day, Saturday, Richard called a general meeting. All the mechanics were summoned, including Samantha. "I'll be direct," Richard began, his tone stern. "I know what's been happening here. I know about the sabotage, the jokes, the doctored work orders." Chuck tried to protest. "Richard, nobody—" "Shut it, Chuck," Richard cut him off. "Don't treat me like a fool. I have eyes, I have ears. And more importantly, I have an employee who in 2 months has brought in more new clients than you all have in 2 years. The silence was tense. "Samantha stays," Richard declared, "and anyone who has a problem with that can find another job. I'm sick of this backward mentality that's costing the business money." "But Richard," Jake tried. "No buts." Richard slammed his fist on the table. "Look at the numbers. Since Samantha started working as a mechanic, our revenue has gone up 20%. 20%. He let the information sink in before continuing. "Do you know how many female clients we had before? Almost none. Now they make up 1/3 of our customer base. And do you know why? Because they finally have someone they feel comfortable with." Samantha kept her eyes down, uneasy being the center of attention. "So here's the deal," Richard concluded. "From today on, any act of sabotage, harassment, or discrimination will result in immediate termination. No warning, no second chance." "Understood?" Reluctant murmurs of agreement filled the room. "Samantha," Richard turned to her, "I want you to report any incident directly to me. Any incident. I don't want heroics. I want professionalism." "Yes, sir," Samantha replied. The meeting ended, leaving an even tenser atmosphere. Samantha knew Richard's words wouldn't change hearts and minds overnight, but it was a start. In the days that followed, there was an uneasy truce. Chuck, Jake, and Pete avoided her, but didn't attack her directly. Other mechanics began interacting with her more openly. Then, on a rainy Wednesday, everything changed again. Samantha was working on a Civic when she heard shouts from outside. "Help! Someone, please!" She ran out and saw chaos. A car had skidded on the wet road and crashed into a pole in front of the garage. Smoke rose from the hood, and a woman was screaming hysterically. "My son, he's trapped!" Samantha didn't hesitate. She rushed to the car and saw a boy about 10 years old in the back seat. His seatbelt jammed, the door dented from the impact. "Stay calm, I'll get him out," she told the mother, already assessing the situation. The engine was steaming dangerously, and she could smell fuel. There was no time to waste. "I need a Phillips screwdriver and pliers," she shouted. Matthew came running with the tools. Samantha leaned through the broken window, ignoring the glass cutting her arms. "Hey, champ," she said to the frightened boy. "I'm gonna get you out, okay?" With precise movements, she worked on the seatbelt mechanism. Her years of experience with automotive systems guided her hands. "Samantha, fire!" someone yelled. Small flames were starting to flicker under the hood. Samantha sped up, finally freeing the belt. "Come with me." She pulled the boy through the window, shielding him from the glass with her own body. The moment they were clear, Chuck appeared with a fire extinguisher, putting out the flames. Jake was already on the phone with the fire department, and Pete was helping the hysterical mother. Samantha handed the boy to his mother, who sobbed with relief. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." "He's okay," Samantha assured, though her own arms were bleeding from the cuts. "Maybe a doctor should check him, but he's fine." Frank appeared with a first aid kit. "Samantha, your arms." She looked down, only then noticing the extent of the cuts. The adrenaline had masked the pain. As Frank tended to her wounds, Samantha realized all the mechanics were watching her. But this time there was no hostility or disdain. There was something new, genuine respect. Chuck stepped forward, still holding the fire extinguisher. For a long moment, they stared at each other in silence. "You were brave," he finally said. The words clearly difficult for him. "Really brave." "Anyone would have done the same," Samantha replied. "No." Chuck shook his head. "I hesitated. I saw the fire and hesitated. You didn't." It was the closest thing to a compliment she'd ever heard from him. The firefighters arrived, followed by the police and an ambulance. The boy was examined and released with just a few scratches. His mother couldn't stop thanking Samantha. When the commotion finally settled, Richard gathered everyone again. "What Samantha did today," he began, then stopped, clearly emotional. "She risked her own safety to save a child. That's courage, that's character." He turned to Chuck, Jake, and Pete. "You three have worked here for years. You're good mechanics. But being a good professional goes beyond technical knowledge." Chuck lowered his head, for the first time seeming ashamed of his behavior. "Samantha has proven her worth in every way possible," Richard continued, "as a mechanic, as a person, as a colleague. It's time for you to decide. Will you stay stuck in the past or embrace the future?" The silence stretched for several seconds. Jake was the first to break it. "Samantha," he said hesitantly, I owe you an apology, a big one." Samantha looked at him in surprise. "I was an idiot," Jake went on. "A prejudiced idiot. You're a better mechanic than I am, and I knew it. That's why I tried to push you away." Pete cleared his throat. "Me too. Sorry for the things I did. There's no excuse." All eyes turned to Chuck. He was visibly wrestling with himself, decades of beliefs clashing with the reality before him. "My father always said a garage was no place for a woman," he began slowly. "I raised my daughters believing that, but—" He paused, swallowing hard. "But if they grow up to be half the professional you are, I'll be proud." Samantha felt tears prick her eyes. After months of struggle, finally. "Thank you," she said simply. "We all make mistakes. What matters is learning." Chuck extended his hand. "Fresh start?" Samantha gripped it firmly. "Fresh start." One by one, the other mechanics approached. Some offered apologies, others just respectful nods. The barrier had been broken, but Samantha knew the story didn't end there. Acceptance in a moment of emotion was one thing. The real test would come in the day-to-day. In the following days, she noticed subtle but meaningful changes. Chuck stopped hiding tools. Jake began including her in technical conversations. Pete even offered help when she was overwhelmed. Matthew was beaming. "See? I told you they were dinosaurs, but even dinosaurs can evolve." "It took nearly a tragedy," Samantha observed. "Sometimes that's what it takes for people to see beyond their own prejudices," Matthew mused. A week after the incident, Samantha got a surprise. The mother of the boy she'd saved showed up at the garage. "Dr. Samantha?" the woman asked. "Just Samantha," she corrected. "And I'm not a doctor, I'm a mechanic." "To me, you're a doctor," the woman insisted. "Though you saved my son, I came to bring you something." She handed over an envelope. Samantha opened it and found a check for a considerable amount. "I can't accept this," Samantha tried to return it. Please, the woman begged. It's not payment. It's gratitude. Use it for something important. Samantha was about to refuse again when she had an idea. What if we used it for something that benefits others? How so? I was thinking many women don't know the basics about cars. They become vulnerable, dependent. What if we created a basic mechanics course for women? The woman's eyes lit up. That would be wonderful. Richard, who had been listening, stepped closer. The garage could host it, on Saturdays when it's less busy. I'll help, Frank offered. I can teach the electrical part. To Samantha's surprise, Chuck also spoke up. I can teach about engines if you want my help. Samantha smiled. All help is welcome. The news of the course spread quickly. Within 2 weeks, 20 women had signed up. Women of all ages and backgrounds. On the first Saturday of class, Samantha was nervous. Teaching was different from doing, but when she saw the enthusiasm on her students' faces, her confidence returned. Welcome, she began. Today you'll learn that there's no mystery to mechanics, just knowledge, and knowledge is power. The classes were a success. Women who had never held a wrench learned to change tires, check oil, and identify basic problems. Chuck turned out to be a surprisingly patient teacher. Jake created illustrated handouts. Pete organized the tools for hands-on lessons. It was a remarkable transformation. One afternoon, after a particularly lively class, Mrs. Eleanor Thompson appeared. I heard about your project, she told Samantha. I admire your initiative. I want to sponsor an expansion. An expansion? More classes, better equipment, maybe even official certification, Mrs. Thompson explained. Rochester needs this. Samantha could hardly believe it. In just a few months, she had gone from persona non grata to the leader of a community project. But not everything was smooth sailing. Some male customers still resisted having their cars worked on by a woman. Occasionally, Samantha heard unpleasant remarks. Once, a new customer stormed in shouting, "Where's the mechanic who worked on C? My car." That was me, Samantha replied calmly. Is there a problem? A woman, the man turned red. I demand to speak to the person in charge. You are, Samantha kept her cool. What's the specific issue? The issue is I don't authorize any woman to touch my car. Before Samantha could respond, Chuck stepped forward. Then you'll have to find another garage. The customer blinked in surprise. Excuse me? Samantha is our best mechanic, Chuck declared. If you have a problem with that, that's your problem. Jake and Pete joined in, forming a wall of solidarity. Even the younger mechanics stepped closer. The customer looked around, realizing he was outnumbered. This is outrageous. What's outrageous is your prejudice, Richard appeared. Take your car, we don't need customers like you. The man left in a huff, swearing never to return. Promises, promises, Pete muttered, drawing laughter from the group. Samantha felt a wave of emotion. Months ago, these same men had tried to push her out. Now they were defending her. Thank you, she said, her voice thick. We should be thanking you, Chuck replied, for not giving up, for teaching us. The course project kept growing. Soon there was a waiting list, and other garages began showing interest in replicating the model. Samantha was invited to speak at a meeting of the Mechanics Association. It was both an honor and terrifying. I don't know how to speak in public, she confessed to Lucy. So you teach every week, her cousin reminded her. It's the same thing, just with more people. On the day of the presentation, Samantha was shaking. The room was full of garage owners, mostly middle-aged men. She began by telling her story, the father who taught her, the garage she lost, the fight to be accepted. Then she talked about the course, about the untapped potential. Half the population is women, she said. Half the drivers are women. But how many feel comfortable in a traditional garage? She showed the numbers: increased clientele, customer satisfaction, impact on the community. I'm not saying every garage needs a female mechanic, she clarified, but every garage should be open to the possibility. The reception was mixed. Some applauded enthusiastically, others remained skeptical. But the seed was planted. In the following months, Samantha saw gradual changes in the city. Other garages began hiring women. Similar courses popped up. But it was an unexpected visit that truly showed how much things had changed. On an ordinary afternoon, a young woman in her 20s showed up at the garage. "Samantha?" she asked timidly. "Yes? My name is Carly. I'm Chuck's daughter." Samantha was surprised. Chuck had mentioned his daughters but never introduced them. "Nice to meet you," Samantha replied. I wanted to thank you," Carly said, "for changing my dad's mind. It wasn't me." "Yes, it was," Carly insisted. "The other day he came home and said if I wanted to learn mechanics, he'd teach me. I never thought I'd hear that from him." Samantha felt tears in her eyes, real deep generational change. "Do you want to learn?" she asked. Carly nodded eagerly. "I always have, but I thought it wasn't for women." "There's no such thing as for women or for men," Samantha said. "It's for people, and mechanics is for anyone with passion." Chuck appeared, looking embarrassed. "Carly shouldn't be bothering you." "She's not bothering me," Samantha assured. "She was telling me she wants to learn mechanics." Chuck looked at his daughter with a mix of pride and regret. "I wasted so much time with old ideas." "What matters is changing," Samantha said gently. "Samantha," Chuck began hesitantly, would you take Carly as an apprentice? I mean, I'd teach her too, but..." "It'd be an honor," Samantha replied promptly. Carly's smile lit up the garage. It was a full circle. Samantha, who had fought so hard to be accepted, was now opening doors for the next generation. That night at home, she told Lucy everything. "You did it," her cousin said proudly. "You changed everything." "I didn't do it alone," Samantha corrected. "And there's still a lot to do." "There always will be," Lucy agreed. "But look where you were 6 months ago and where you are now." Samantha reflected on the journey. The initial lies, the forced revelation, the hostility, the sabotage, then the slow change, the gradual acceptance, the hard-earned respect. "You know what's most ironic?" Samantha said. "If they'd accepted me from the start, I'd just be another mechanic. Their resistance forced me to be better, to prove more, to create something bigger." "Your father would be proud," Lucy said softly. Samantha nodded, emotional. "I think so. He always said I'd change the world. At the time, I thought it was an exaggeration." "You didn't change the world," Lucy observed, "but you changed your corner of it. And that's already a lot." The next day, Samantha arrived early at the garage as usual, but now she checked the equipment not out of fear of sabotage, but out of professionalism. Carly was already there, eager to start. Chuck taught her the basics, but often called Samantha to step in. "It's different," he admitted. "Teaching my daughter. I want to get it right this time." During lunch, the team sat together for the first time in months. Conversations flowed naturally, including Samantha without distinction. "You know," Jake commented, "my wife wants to take the course. Said she's tired of depending on me for everything car-related." "Mine, too," Pete added. "It's become a trend in town." Frank smiled. "Samantha, you started a movement." "We started it," she corrected. "All of us." That afternoon, a reporter from the local newspaper showed up. She wanted to do a story about the course and about Samantha, the first female mechanic, at Thompson's garage. "I'm not the first female mechanic," Samantha told the reporter. "Just the first one here. There are plenty of others fighting their own battles." The article came out on Sunday with a photo of Samantha teaching the course. The headline was "Breaking Barriers with a Wrench." The response was immediate. Calls from women interested in the course, from other cities wanting to replicate the model, even from some companies offering sponsorships. But it was one specific call that moved Samantha the most. "Samantha," the voice on the other end was hesitant. "Yes?" "It's Beatrice, from St. Charles. You don't know me, but I knew your father. He used to fix our car." Samantha felt her heart race. "I remember your family's cars. I read about you in the paper. My sister lives in Rochester and sent it to me. Samantha, we all felt terrible when the garage closed. What happened wasn't fair." "Thank you," Samantha managed to say. "There's more," Beatrice continued. "A group of your father's old customers is organizing. We want you to know, if you decide to come back, you'll have our full support." Samantha had to sit down, her legs weak. "I don't know what to..." Say, you don't have to decide anything now, Beatrice said gently. Just know the option is there. Your father would be so proud of who you've become. After hanging up, Samantha stared into space, processing. Go back to St. Charles? Reopen her father's garage? News? Richard appeared, noticing her expression. Samantha told him about the call. Richard listened silently, his face growing more serious. Are you thinking of going? He asked when she finished. I don't know, Samantha admitted. It's a lot to take in. Richard nodded slowly. I get it. It'd be a huge loss for us, but I understand. I haven't even decided yet. Samantha, Richard interrupted. I'll be straight with you. You've transformed this garage. Not just as a mechanic, but as a person, you've built something special here. He paused, choosing his words. But I also get the pull of going back, honoring your father's memory, reclaiming what was lost. Those are powerful reasons. What would you do? Samantha asked. I'm not you, Richard replied. But I can say this. If you stay, I want to formalize your position, not just as a regular mechanic, but as head mechanic, with profit sharing. Samantha was stunned. Richard, Chuck's close to retiring, he explained. I need someone to take over technical leadership. I can't think of anyone better. It was a tempting offer, very tempting. Can I think about it? Of course, take all the time you need. That night, Samantha barely slept. Lucy tried to help, but respected it when her cousin said she needed to think alone. Samantha took out an old photo of her father and stared at it. What would he want her to do? Go back and rebuild his legacy, or keep building something new? The answer came from an unexpected memory. Her father fixing an engine, teenage Samantha beside him. Samantha, he'd said, sometimes we think we have to fix everything that's broken, but some things don't need to go back to how they were. They can be something new, something better. Back then, he was talking about a part they were adapting, but now? Samantha smiled. Her father, wise even in memories. The next morning, she found Richard. I'll stay, she said simply. The relief on his face was clear. Great, great. We'll sort out the details. But I have conditions, Samantha interrupted. Name them. I want to expand the training program. Not just the women's course, but an apprentice program. Give opportunities to young people, especially girls who want to learn the trade. Done. And I want hiring autonomy. If we're really changing, I need to bring in new people with open minds. Richard considered it. Within budget, I agree. Then we have a deal. Samantha extended her hand. They shook hands, sealing the new chapter. The news spread quickly through the garage. Reactions were mostly positive, with even Chuck admitting it was the right choice. You deserve it, he said simply. You earned this. But it was Carly's reaction that touched Samantha the most. You're going to be the boss? The young girl asked with shining eyes. That means I'll be the boss's apprentice. Hey, Chuck pretended to be indignant. I'm still your father and your first teacher. But Samantha is Samantha, Carly replied, drawing laughter. Samantha's first official act as head mechanic was calling Beatrice in St. Charles. I really appreciate the offer, she said. It means more than you can imagine, but I've built something here, something I need to keep going. We understand, Beatrice replied. But Samantha, what you're doing there has inspired some of us here. We're thinking of starting a mechanic cooperative. Samantha felt tears in her eyes. That would be amazing. You're the one who showed us it's possible, Beatrice said. Thank you for not giving up. After hanging up, Samantha stood still for a moment, taking it all in. In less than a year, she had gone from outcast to leader, from rejected to respected. But more importantly, she had opened doors. For Carly, for the women in the course, for others who would follow. The phone rang. It was a garage in Harrisburg, asking about the training program. Samantha smiled and answered. There was so much work to do, barriers to break, minds to change, but now she wasn't alone. She had allies, she had support, she had a position where she could make a real difference. She looked around the garage, Chuck teaching Carly, Frank helping Matthew, Jake and Pete working in harmony. It wasn't perfect. There would still be challenges, prejudices to face, battles to fight, but the path was open. Samantha picked up her toolbox, the same one that had been vandalized months ago, now carefully restored, and got to work. She had cars to fix, people to train, barriers to keep breaking, one wrench at a time. End of story. And so, dear listeners, Samantha proved that skill knows no gender and that persistence can soften even the hardest hearts. What did you think of her journey? Share in the comments if you faced similar prejudices. If you enjoyed it, leave a like and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one.